Hi, everyone, and welcome to another video in our series, which we're titling St. John the Divine's Financial Situation Serious but Not Fatal. The purpose of this series of videos is to introduce all members of the congregation to our financial systems, to provide information about our current financial situation, and to ensure that everyone feels confident participating in discussions about future plans. This is a series that is going to include 4 short-ish videos, and then we are planning one bonus video. That bonus video will be longer and is really meant to be for people who want a very deep dive into the details of our budgeting system and how it currently works. Our last video, video 1, gave an overview of our current financial situation, and so this video, video 2, is going to be focused on our current expenses, current St. John the Divine expenses. And so, David, hi. It is good to see you again. I am here with our wonderful treasurer, David Buckman. And David, what are some of our current ongoing expenses?
Okay, first quick comment about $300,000 a year, or half our total operating expenses, is payroll, which of
Mm,
course goes up regularly because of cost of living increases and inflation.
mm.
Now, in video number 1, we actually used a chart which shows you what these are. So I'm going to quickly bring that chart up. Okay, this is our total operating costs in thousands of dollars a year, and it goes from 2018 through 19, 20, 21, and 22, which is our current year. We are using the budget data, but we're tracking the budget very quickly. The scale very quickly goes from 0 to 700,000. That's not $700, sadly, and that gives our total operating costs, as I said, and they dropped a little bit, of course, during COVID, but the key feature of that chart is that the largest sector is actually at the bottom, and that is the blue, dark blue, which is of course the clergy
Mm.
part, and that takes about 26% on average over the 5-year period, and 99% of that, almost all of it, is payroll.
Hmm.
Okay, so
Okay.
that's the next one, next largest in this sort of dark brown orange, is actually property, and I want to do a little bit of a dive into property, and so for that I'm going to have to put up a different chart.
I see that there's this chart here that shows all of the different things that make up property costs. So, can you explain a little bit to me about what all of these different things are?
Sure. Once again, there's 5 years from 2018 through 2022. The scale goes from 0 at the bottom to 200,000 per
Mm.
year. Again, the largest one is on the bottom, the dark blue. That is insurance mostly. A little bit of it is taxes. And it's gone, as you can see, from just over 20,000 before COVID to about 30,000 plus now, because insurance costs have gone up.
Mm.
Next biggest one, the sort of brownish one, is our cleaner, which, as you can see, it took a fairly big jump in 2022, largely because we had a cleaner for these 4 years here, who in fact was much cheaper than our current cleaner, whom we had to hire after the old cleaner emigrated, I believe, back to Ireland or wherever he came from. So sadly, we were forced to look for a new cleaner, and the new rate is much higher than it was. Next highest one is the gray one, which is utilities, which is very straightforward. Heat, light, sewers, that sort of thing. Just the regular things that you pay in your own apartment or house, each year to keep warm and have lights on and so on. Now the yellow band is the next biggest, and that, as you can see, it fluctuates a bit. And what it is all the sort of ongoing repairs and maintenance that the property team have to manage. And
Mm.
that's only, it's about 18% of our total costs in the property area. The utilities were about 19%. So, and I think with an older building, it's actually wonderful that the property team have kept the repair costs to to just 18%. So I'd like to move on to the next largest one, which is administration. This chart is the next largest area of expenditure, which is administration, which covers about 16% of our total. And like payroll, it has covers a wide range, but unlike payroll, unlike property, it does have this dark blue at the bottom is actually payroll, which takes about 55% of the total, including summer coverage.
Mm-hmm.
Above that, we have bookkeeping, which is in sort of dark brown orange, and that is about a further 11%. Telephone and internet costs are 10%, and they are in the yellow. They went up sharply in actually 2021 because we had a new system put in, and that's why it's as much as 10% of our total costs over that period. And the next one worth mentioning is perhaps printing and stationery at 9% of the total, which includes our leased photocopier. Okay, and that's all the costs of leasing the photocopier, the toner, and all that sort of thing. It's the next largest area of the of our total operating costs is actually diocesan assessment, which takes about 15% on average. This is driven by our financial performance in the prior year, and sadly, it's going to go up another 11% from what we're paying this year, which is about $7,000 a month, mostly due to major realized gains in 2021. So there's not much we can say about that. That's like, as we use the analogy in video one, I think, of income tax. You know, that's just something we have to pay. We have really not much control over it in the short term. I'd like to put another chart up, if I may, which is going to talk about the next largest item, which of course is worship and music. On the screen now is total worship costs on the same sort of scale as before. And again, like administration, these are, you know, around $100,000, except for the COVID years. Again, the largest sector is on the bottom, the dark blue, and that is the worship payroll for our director of music, which takes about 3/4 of the total worship cost budget. The next highest one is worth talking about a little bit more because that is for the musicians. That is the music scholars who sing and play for us at our Sunday services and other festivals. First of all, I should explain why it was much higher in 2018, 2019, because in 2020, we realized we have a couple of endowment funds, the McRae Fund for the choral scholars and the Sutton Fund for the organ scholars, that were invested, I think, back in the 1990s. And as an endowment fund, you know, their purpose is to provide income which can be used to offset the costs. And that we did during 2020. And of course, the costs went down because both of COVID, we were not having many services, and of course we were using that endowment fund. But now it's kind of back up to its more normal. But that, on average, is only about 13%. But still, that means that, you know, we've got almost 90% is covered by the two, if you like, payroll items: the director of music and, of course, the musicians themselves. The rest of it is a mixture of stuff. Upkeep of the AV system, audiovisual system, for example, maintenance, which is tuning of the instruments, and the Chancellor Guild is also lumped into that, putting flowers on the altar and so on. The last smallest sector, only about 6% of our total on average over the last 5 years, is of course family ministry and outreach. And it's not worth putting a chart up on that because 87% of that is payroll for our part-time family coordinator, ministry coordinator, and you know, the rest of it is a small amount on expenses, and the other biggest single item is our membership in GVAT, which is a further 6% of that sector. Again, it's not worth putting a chart up on that.
Right. So what I feel like I've seen with you showing me all these charts and talking about all of these pieces is that there are a number of different areas where we have expenses, where we spend money, and that within each of those categories, there are also different divisions and different items. And there isn't any one obvious thing that seems like waste or seems like overspending or seems completely unnecessary. And also that for some of these things, at least, they simply cost what they cost. That if we are going to insure the buildings and it costs what it costs to insure them, then that insurance amount is not something we can really have savings on. And yet, you said in the last video that one of the things we could think about was maybe changing some of our ongoing expenses. Maybe we need to think about saving a little bit, cutting back a little bit. And so I'm wondering if you could explain to me a little bit about how we might change some of our current ongoing expenses.
Sure, I'm going to whip through this fairly quickly because I can explain it based on the charts you've seen.
Mhm.
I mentioned up front, the biggest outlay is payroll, of which clergy are the largest part. Now, I've got some good news actually from the diocese that COLA, or cost of a living allowance for 2023, may be only 3 to 4% and not the 7 to 8%, which we were expecting because that's what inflation is running at today.
Mhm.
Our clergy automatically get the cost of living allowance, and normally we pass it on to our staff, so that's going to lower our 2023 budget a bit.
Mhm.
Now, how many clergy we have and what type is clearly a major financial matter. Partly because where they are on the personal scale, which depends on their length of service, also is a major factor in how much payroll they take. However, the bishop appoints our clergy, of course, so we would have to negotiate any changes with that.
Okay.
Negotiate that with the bishop.
Mhm.
We do control, of course, how many staff we have on our payroll, also how many hours we pay them per week, but we do have an external review, hopefully carried out by the diocese coming up, which may give some clues into possibly that, but I'm not looking to that as being a major source of saving. So now going to the next category, which is property.
Mhm.
Again, that has no payroll, so that's not relevant there. And as you said, insurance costs, we can't deliberately underinsure because the diocese may veto that, and it's not obviously prudent to do that. I think I mentioned we hired a new cleaner in 2021, and I think maybe we need to go back into the market and look to see if we can get a cheaper cleaner or some way of doing it more cheaply.
Mhm.
Utilities have risen, of course, along with energy costs, which of course we need to review. One possibility in the future might be solar panels, for example, which I know the property team are starting to look at.
Mhm.
Maintenance, as I said, is not too significant despite all the church buildings. I should also note that all upgrades, such as the recently put in new office floor for about $4,000, are separate projects, which are accounted separately and are not included in our regular operating costs. So
Right.
we'll talk about projects later in the later video. Okay.
Mhm.
But in property, I think the smaller costs, which are so small they don't show up on the chart, like security and grounds maintenance, might offer some scope to prune a little bit of expenses, but not a lot.
Mhm.
Because the property team are very diligent in using volunteer labor if they possibly can.
Right. Right.
Admin or administration was the next largest. Again, salaries are 55% of their total, but that's not something we can change, I think, quickly or would want to change. But again, that's a major item. Bookkeeping, we use a professional external company. Their costs have actually dropped since 2018 a little bit. They were about 12,000 and now 11,000. And they take care of all our electronic and check payments, bank reconciliation, and so
Mhm.
on. Telephone and internet more than doubled in 2021 to 10% now while we put a new system in. I think that, again, needs perhaps to look at as potential possible savings there.
Right. Maybe we could find a cheaper plan or
Something like that, yeah. Printing, of course, that's an interesting one because we use the printer a lot to produce bulletins, and we could obviously print presumably fewer if, as some churches do, we use a projector screen to display the bulletin, or people can have it
right.
streamed to their cell phones. But I mean that's a fairly major change, which may or may not go down with our congregation. So worship and music is a tricky one because we have to recognize that music has a key place in our liturgy, and we have a reputation built up over 3 decades. Trying to make any significant changes here would be a major issue.
Mhm.
Family ministry, likewise, is the smallest item, but any changes would need to be carefully evaluated, because our mission surely has to include ministry to family and particularly to children who are the future, not only of our society, but of our parish.
So, what I take from what you just walked through is that there are some places where we might potentially have some savings. That might mean things like having going from having a paper bulletin for every single person as they walk in for every single service to maybe doing things in a slightly different way, or maybe rethinking exactly what the music programming is for all of the services. But any of these things you're talking about really are about making changes. And so there isn't anything that could be saved without making some changes. So it seems to me that in order to balance our budget and possibly cut some of our expenses to do so, we really need members of the congregation to think hard about what they're willing to change or what they're willing to let go of or what they're willing to do differently. And so one of the reasons why then these budget videos are so helpful is they give people a sense of what some of the options are. But there isn't really obvious low hanging fruit, no one easy fix, no one magic trick that is going to fix all of this. I also take away from this the sense that because we aren't just going to be able to save our way into a balanced budget, at least not without doing some really radical, drastic things that I think people would probably see as moving away from some of our missions and priorities. Sounds like we really need to think about bringing in some more money. And so, in addition to cutting, if we're going to bring in more revenue, we need to think about how a church can bring in more revenue. And I know that that's going to be the topic of the next video, is how our current revenue works and also maybe some ideas for bringing in new revenue. So I'm looking forward to talking to you about that.